God. Good morning, everybody. What a great pleasure to be here. An enormous conference. Welcome. For the next hour, we're talking about disruption, and we're not talking about the London Tube Network or anything like that. It's a very popular word. You probably wouldn't expect to hear Karl Marx referred to at this august event, but he, in fact, was one of the early people to recognize how capitalism had in it a feature of self-destruction, destructive tendencies, of incomers destroying incumbents. Now, he thought it was all part of the process of crises of capitalism, creating problems for the system. Then there was this very well-known economist from the 1950s, Joseph Schumpeter, who invented the phrase creative destruction. He put the emphasis on the word creative. And in fact, I'm going to just read you a quote from him because he was saying this in 1950. In the case of the retail trade, the competition that matters arises not from additional shops of the same type, but from the department store, the chain store, the mail order house, and the supermarket, which are bound to destroy those pyramids of other shops sooner or later. To talk about shops without talking about those facts is like Hamlet without the Danish prince. He was recognizing the creative part of destruction, and somehow, over the years since he wrote that, disruption has been seen as a positive feature of the capitalist system rather than a system of crisis. So, for the next hour, we are going to, Noah's Ark style, have two presenters coming on at a time. We're going to have chat up here on stage, first with two emerging disruptors, Uber and Airbnb. Then we're going to have some more established disruptors, Amazon and Virgin. And then we're going to hear from two companies coping with disruption, Whitbread, running Premier Inn, and Royal Mail. So we're going to have 6 speakers over 1 hour in 3 conversations with 2 each. So let me, if I could, welcome my first guests from Uber and Airbnb, Joe Bertram and James McClure. Joe leads Uber's UK, Ireland, and Nordic operations. Now, she's been at Uber for 2 years and has grown it from a small team of 3 in London to more than 130 people in 15 cities. And Uber is in 9 cities, is that right, in the UK now?
I think it might be up to 11
now.
We
Okay, so
launched 2 more.
the bio's getting out of date. And Joe was a management consultant before all of that. James, I should say, is general manager for UK and Ireland at Airbnb. Prior to that, he was also a management consultant. Read what you would like into that. Now, some way before that, he was at Google as well. Joe, let's just get, the most interesting feature of Uber is how it has become so large. It was not the first, or it was not a particularly original idea to be a kind of smartphone booking system for cabs. Why, in your view, did Uber become as big as it did?
I think a couple of things. I mean, firstly, we made it incredibly easy for people to get a car at the touch of a button, both from the user interface, but also just how it actually works. There's a huge amount of operational complexity behind getting you a car at the touch of a button. Secondly, we made it a safe ride. So here in the UK, we use fully licensed drivers with license with Transport for London. You can share a live map of your journey with family and friends. You get your driver's photo and registration so you know you're getting in the right car. And then thirdly, we've been able to scale that model incredibly quickly around the world. So we're now in 350-odd cities in over 60 countries in 6 continents. And so the ability to do that with small teams in every single city so quickly has been.
But why did Halo not do as well as Uber?
It's interesting here in London, the difference between using black taxis and using private hire. Halo's done phenomenally well among the black taxi. What we were able to do here in London is use the private hire model to bring lower cost because we keep them busier. Black taxis are often doing street hails as well. Private hire don't have that privilege. They don't do the knowledge. But because we keep the drivers busier, we use the technology to make sure they're doing more trips in an hour. We can then bring down the price for consumers.
Was the surge pricing, was the pricing model a key innovation of Uber's? Because black cabs, they vary their price a little by time of day. They don't vary it in real time by how busy they are. Was that part of it?
I actually think it was. It's interesting you raised that because some people, when they first use it, find it a bit of a negative thing. We're very used to some form of peak pricing. Like you said, black taxis on a Saturday night are more expensive. The train, if you go in rush hour, is more expensive. But we're used to knowing when that is. What Uber does is it shows when demand massively outstrips the number of cars on the road, and remember the drivers are free to work whenever and wherever they want, then the price goes up. That encourages more drivers to drive in the right places, and some of us just wait 5 or 10 minutes so that we can travel a bit later to go home, which means we're 100% reliable.
Where I'm going to take issue with you, though, is your opening answer said that basically what Uber had got right was the technology. Bluntly, isn't the technology the easiest bit, or is it really a complicated? Is it difficult for people to make a taxi hailing app? I mean, it can't be that difficult.
The app on its surface, yes. I'm not a developer, but I would have thought people could make apps like that. I think it's important to remember there's a huge amount of data that works behind it. Remember, we have one simple app that works in 350 different cities. So how do you make an app that's so beautifully simple from the customer side, but also allows for all the nuances in all those cities? The fact that we're using, one type of license model here in London, we have ride sharing in the US, and it's still just that same app.
And also I'd say that it's not necessarily you create a great piece of technology and then sit back, let it do the rest. I'm sure that both our companies will be doing hundreds of tests on any given day to look to try and improve that user experience, as Joe said, like localizing to different markets in different cities.
Well, James, tell us about Airbnb then. What is it that made Airbnb the standard for this kind of renting accommodation, short lets, people renting their own places? Because again, one could have imagined a lot of people would have a go at that, and yet the one we've all heard of is Airbnb. Why do you think Airbnb got into the position it's in?
I mean, you're right, it's not the most revolutionary idea. I mean, ultimately, we'll have all stayed with family or friends when going to visit somewhere, so the actual notion of what this is not that complicated. I think the ability to sort of suggest and be able to cater for what people want when they're going to travel. So when we ask, 9 out of 10 people want to be able to live like a local when they're traveling, and it makes sense that London is, the West End is amazing, Westminster is amazing, but there's so much more as a city that you look to uncover. I think then when it comes to the nature of staying in people's homes, that it's the reason why we spend so much time, effort, and probably money as well, is that we like the idea of home. So staying in a home when you're traveling for business or on holiday isn't, again, the biggest leap of faith. But then I think one of the keys, and I think it's no coincidence that a lot of the larger sharing economy companies came out in that 2008, 2010 period, is that when times are tight, you look to make the assets you do have work much harder for you.
But James, you're explaining why a sort of sharing economy model for accommodation works. Why did Airbnb come to dominate that model? I mean, I can see all the attractions of me renting out a spare room or renting out a spare flat, my flat, while I go on holiday. But why did Airbnb sweep up so much in that model? Is it the technology? It's not the technology, is it? Is it the fact that you were the innovators of we'll help you take photos of your place and make it look really nice online? I mean, what was the innovation?
It's honestly a mix of factors. So certainly the website is very easy to use, and if you look at it's always flattering. I'm not sure, maybe some of the copywriters would agree, when you look at lots of websites that look quite similar in look and feel to Airbnb's. Certainly the nature of the photography, meaning that the iPhone or Android phone you may have doesn't really do interior photography that well, and so having someone come along and take, you
need that wide-angle lens to make the room look really big.
Exactly, get the filters on it. It makes a lot of difference. But I think also, and going back to some of the themes of earlier about the importance of export, that if you're using online as the platform to be able to speak to the whole world. So there's nearly 2 million places you can stay on Airbnb, and I've been very fortunate enough to stay in one in Fiji. We don't have any marketing in Fiji. There's not an office in Fiji. I mean, if we do open it, I'll put my hand up first to the CEO to say that I'll go and run it. But the nature of the internet is that it means that you can bring together disparate groups of people that may have a similar goal and be able to bring those together in one place.
And I think trust is really important in that, and that's what both Uber and Airbnb have succeeded in. And so the fact that after every single trip in an Uber, the customer's asked to rate their driver, the same every time you stay in an Airbnb. Before you had that, technology brought that transparency and that accountability. I would be nervous to stay in the house of a random person in New York, but now I can read the reviews and I know that the 30 people who stayed there before rated them highly.
But am I right in saying, I'm listening to you both, and I think you're struggling to say why your companies have prevailed as opposed to other companies who've tried to do exactly the same thing. Would it be right that there's a kind of a tipping model, that some very small factors, maybe it is the surge pricing or maybe it is the photography, some very small factors in disruptive businesses can turn out to just give you a little more momentum than competitors, and that momentum generates more success, and once you're on your route, then the others fall by the wayside and you can begin to dominate. Is that a feature of these kind of internet disruptors?
It's probably true in terms of how we reach new audiences, both on the driver side and on the rider side. A huge amount of our marketing is word of mouth. You won't see big above-the-line marketing campaigns or adverts. A majority of our riders and of the partners working on the Uber app come through referrals from someone else who's already used the service. I'm sure it's the same with Airbnb.
Yeah, and also it's real people who are involved in this. So later on this week in Paris, we have, I guess, the equivalent of the CBI conference, but for Airbnb hosts. We've got 5,000 hosts from more than 100 countries to debate similar things that CBI would talk about with its members. So being able to understand what it is that can make a difference for people, and also how to get the best potential feedback we can get from our customers.
Now, you're both disrupting businesses, to use the phrase of the session. You don't bake an omelette without breaking eggs, do you? And there's obviously been a lot of opposition to Uber, I mean, quite famously, Joe, and there's been quite a bit of hotel resistance to Airbnb, I think it's fair to say, James. Just talk through the regulatory opposition to your models and your pitch. I mean, I'd just be interested in how much of an impediment it has been. Joe.
One interesting thing about the transport sector is the regulations are not only country by country, they're actually here in the UK city by city. So navigating those and being able to have a flexible enough model to work around them has been critical for Uber. I mean, here in the UK, the regulatory regime that we're operating in has existed like this for decades. I think what's happened is it was written prior to the advent of smartphones or Google Maps. And we've been able to innovate using those technologies. The other thing is the speed of growth of these companies. I mean, Uber's just been in London 3 years. We now have over 20,000 drivers, a couple of million customers, and we've done well over 20 million trips. So it comes out of nowhere. And that can, of course, be uncomfortable for some of the incumbents. And what we've seen is the cities that have received the most benefits from companies like Uber and competitors are the ones that have embraced us and worked with companies from the sharing economy like Uber and Airbnb to figure out forward-looking regulations that allow all those competitors to coexist.
Which cities have, if you like, embraced you? Because I've heard more about cities restraining you rather than embracing you.
So we've actually got ride sharing, so they call it TNC regulations in something like 60 states across the United States. So initially, again, it was a model that didn't fit exactly in the framework that was written, and 60 different states have changed the regulations to allow for that. We're further behind here in Europe. I mean, here in the UK, we've seen phenomenal success, but again, working within the existing regulations. There are some challenges now coming where Transport for London are proposing some changes that might seek to protect some of the black cab interests, but wouldn't help.
This is the 5-minute rule that
Exactly.
basically you pick up a Uber, you have to wait 5 minutes before it can pick you up, correct?
Exactly, to try and preserve this distinction between black cabs and private hire. Now, what we'd argue is to level the playing field, which absolutely does need to be leveled, you should reduce or revise the regulations for black cabs rather than impose additional barriers for Uber and other companies like that, just to try and preserve the status quo.
So do you recognize any case the black cabs have? Because obviously we've had regulation about getting to become a black cab driver, and the regulation is an entry barrier that you have to have a pretty good knowledge of the streets of London, and it takes a couple of years to acquire that. Now, you might argue that we shouldn't have had that regulation, but we force people to pass that test. That's their asset, is a license to be in a cab with restricted entry into that industry, and you're coming in and blowing it away. So do they have any case at all, do you think?
Of course, that kind of disruption is incredibly uncomfortable. And I mean, I'm a Londoner. Black cabs are an icon of London. I think we all want to make sure that we keep that. But essentially, that's not about Uber. That's about technology. And that's about satellite navigation, taking away some, probably not all, of the competitive advantage that black taxis have with the knowledge. Still, if I want to get to a meeting in Soho straight after this, I'm probably best to get in a black taxi to find the best possible way. But anyone now can navigate with satellite navigation, and that's not going away.
James, how much resistance has Airbnb faced? We've heard about various markets imposing rules and such like to make it harder for people to rent on Airbnb, but tell us how difficult it's been.
I feel for regulation, I think the nature of how the UK government has approached it is looking to be very forward-thinking in that I'd say that echoing what we talked about the tech city earlier on, that UK is very much the heart of the sharing economy in Europe. Like 1 in 10 of sharing economy startups are based in the UK. I think the challenge is that when, like what Joe was alluding to, that when you have regulation can only look to keep pace with technology. And we were the beneficiaries of a deregulation in May, which meant that Londoners were free to share their homes on Airbnb. Previously, it had been a grey area governed by a couple of 1970s laws that were relating to the use of council housing. So I think that we've seen the benefit of support and positive regulation. I think encouraging that in various sectors makes sense. I think on that, maybe to presage your next question around the competition aspect, because I'm not sure I'm able to be on a sofa like this and not talk about hotels. And,
right, yeah, no, but let's suppose it's about there being a level playing field. So that where I feel for the hotels, you know, and I'm sympathetic to the idea people want to rent out a room, it seems good to let them. On the other hand, if the hotels have to meet a bunch of rules about fire safety and the individual room being rented out by someone doesn't have to meet it, or if the hotel has to pay tax and the individual renter is just not going to declare it and so doesn't pay tax, you can see why the hotels might feel they have a case in saying this is kind of not fair competition. We're willing to face fair competition, but not unfair competition. I just wonder if they've got a case up there. Or...
Let's be clear on the, on the tax side. These are commercial transactions that people are entering into. If you're hosting on Airbnb, you're receiving money, and like any set of money, that's liable for whatever taxes are applicable.
And you would tell the tax authorities how much everybody's rented, and
so we send reminders around to all of our hosts around tax time that this is.
But if the tax authorities said to you, "Can you just tell us how much everybody's had so we can check they're paying the tax?" You'd be obviously delighted to do that, would you?
I mean, we have a very good discussion with HMRC. I think one of the benefits of...
We'll take that as a no.
So if you think of what the Chancellor announced in the most recent budget to come in April 2016 is that people can have tax-free allowance to share their home up to £7,250 without declaring it. So and that's very much, and if you think of London where the limit to people sharing their home is 90 days, that's an appropriate amount, which means that people will be in that stage where they don't have to actually submit, and just reducing red tape all around. Mm.
Can I ask you this? This is the sort of, perhaps a rude question. Do you have to be a slightly ruthless business to be a disruptor? Uber, Joe, has amazingly really, because consumers love the proposition of click, click, you don't have to have cash to pay, cab comes along. Uber somehow, is it just my sense, despite having a proposition which consumers like, has managed to, if you like, lose the PR war, that everywhere you go, there's just a slight annoyance at Uber. So you'll find people like Paul Krugman, the economist, writing stuff about Uber's labor conditions and how he doesn't like the way they treat the drivers. I just wonder whether you have to be a slightly ruthless business. You have to be willing to break those eggs and upset people. And that's just part of and be a little bit unpopular, and whether that's just part of the deal if you're going to disrupt.
I don't think you have to be ruthless. I think you have to be passionate about what you're doing and acknowledge that you will be sometimes unpopular because you are disrupting incumbents. Here at Uber, we certainly acknowledge that we need to do a better job of telling our stories. For every one of those negative comments, there's also hundreds of stories, really inspiring stories, particularly on the driver side, of drivers who've benefited from the flexibility that it brings, that Uber's allowing them to see their family or build their business. It's helping to serve underserved neighborhoods. But we've grown so quickly. We're used to being an underdog, and we've not, and Travis acknowledges this, done as good a job as we want to do at getting that story out about the benefits Uber can bring.
You feel you're the underdog?
We're not anymore, but we were when we started. And it took us a bit longer than it should have to realize that we need to do a better job of that PR piece.
Yeah. And I think similar if you think of and I know we're sitting on a panel called Disruptive Innovation, but that notion of disruption is, if any of our children got a school report and said, John is the disruptive kid in class, it kind of means that you're not letting other people get on, whereas if you think of the benefits it's bringing to consumers, to people, whether they're drivers or hosts, and then to the economy, then that's something which actually is something that is a positive thing rather than being the kid staring out the window and causing trouble.
Both of you, thank you very much indeed. Joe, James, thanks very much. Okay. I'd like to welcome my next two guests on. Christopher North is Managing Director of Amazon.co.uk, Amazon in the UK. He's been running the show there since 2011. And Jane Ann Gardia, who is Chief Executive of Virgin Money. Welcome both. Clean glasses for you, full of new water. Take your seats. Jane Ann has been 28 years in finance and banking.
Thanks.
What?
Thanks, Evan.
Yeah. I mean,
Not
it's
that old.
extraordinary. No. She started age 4 and was one of the founders of Virgin Direct and helped launch the Virgin One account in 1998. And the business was then acquired by RBS. And Jane Ann worked there in senior roles, rejoining Virgin Money in March 2007. And Christopher was running the media group, Amazon book publishing. He was book publishing before Amazon, and then led Amazon's UK media business. Okay, now we've got you two on because you were disruptors once, but you're a little bit more grown up than the Ubers and the Airbnbs now. You've been at it for a few more years. Chris, I'm sort of interested. The life cycle of Amazon's. It started, it was just a loss-making business year after year after year, and folks like me were saying, is it ever going to make a profit? I mean, it's easy to run a business if you make a loss, particularly a retail business. You can always build market share if you're willing to lose money. But it is profitable now. And I just wonder how much patience it takes, or to use a technical word, balls, how much balls it takes to run a business, just at a loss, building market share and saying, we are going to turn it around. We are going to make a profit eventually.
Yeah, well, it's great to hear that we're now considered very profitable, though if you look at the last couple of years, we've basically been breaking even for the last few years. Very modest profits some quarters, slight loss in others. I'm reminded of something that our founder, Jeff Bezos, has said several times. I think he's quoting Warren Buffett here. He says, you can either hold a rock concert or a ballet, but don't advertise a ballet and hold a rock concert. And the point being, you kind of end up with the investors you deserve. We've been consistent for our 20-year history in telling our investors, and you can actually go back to Jeff's first letter to shareholders in 1997, the principles we were going to use in running the business. And those 3 principles he outlined in 97 are still the same ones we follow today. Customer obsession, famously, innovation, the role of invention in our business, but also long-term thinking, making decisions that are right, not when evaluated against a 1 or 2 or 3 year horizon, but against a 7 or 10 year horizon. I think it's the fact that we've stayed true to those 3 principles that has let us thrive even during periods when we may have been misunderstood or there may have been naysayers.
The business has changed enormously, though. I mean, essentially in the late 90s, you thought of Amazon as a book-selling mail order, internet mail order business. Then it sold lots of other things. And really now, it's a marketplace, because you often go to Amazon and you just buy something from a third-party retailer who sells it to you directly via Amazon. What proportion of the business now is the marketplace?
The third-party sellers, So, I mean, last quarter, worldwide, third-party sellers, who are anything from individuals to small or growing entrepreneurs to even very large established retailers here in the UK, folks like House of Fraser or Debenhams sell on Marketplace, we're about 46% of all the units sold worldwide. If you look at last year, over 1 billion units purchased by customers from the Marketplace. And then here in the UK alone, there are probably 20 or 30,000 small businesses who are selling on the Marketplace. These businesses exported using Amazon Marketplace in our different countries, these UK-based businesses, over £1 billion from the UK to destinations in other countries. So the Marketplace has become...
It's half the business.
Yeah, basically. And it will be half or more of the business over time.
And I wonder, Evan, whether, you start off by saying that the implication was that you have to be young business or a young person maybe to disrupt, and I don't think that's true. I think Amazon have proved that you've been more disruptive as you've grown up than you were when you were little, and we certainly want to be disruptive forever.
Well, Jane Ann, tell us a little about Virgin Money. I mean, how is it different from a normal bank? What is the USP?
Well, I think that there's 2 or 3 things that we treasure, if you like, that make us disruptive. First of all, let's be really clear. I think in all companies, disruptive or not, you've sort of got to know what you're doing. So you have to have, I think, industry experts in a banking business for sure, and perhaps in other businesses. I was interested to hear Joe talking so eloquently about the transport business and about taxis. You've got to know about the competition and understand it and compete on the same terms. I think that's really, really important. For us, one of the things that we have different to the other banks is no legacy issues to resolve, and I think that's quite important. Right. Not having the drag of the problems of the past has enabled us to look to the future. So that's key. And then the real important thing for Virgin, I think, is that it's always been, for 40 years, don't forget, a consumer champion, and as consumers have changed, the businesses have had to change, and that's enabled us to build, again, Joe mentioned the word trust. We try very hard to live up to the expectation that consumers put in us, so that we give a trusted relationship to our customers.
So certainly the brand, Virgin, was a brand that kind of stood for disruption, and it was quite a random selection of markets, airlines, bridal dresses, and banking, and it was a sort of an assortment of a portfolio. Often the Virgin connection, the Richard Branson connection is quite slim. Is there any Richard Branson connection at all now?
Oh yes, Virgin own 35% of my business.
They own 35%. But often it was quite a tenuous connection between Richard Branson and the final product. But I'm still not clear. I mean, I understand that you weren't one of the traditional banks, and they obviously aren't popular. But I don't understand what you're offering that they're not offering. Was there an innovation? Was there something? I mean, First Direct was a very innovative proposition when it came out in, 1990 or so. Did you have anything to add to what First Direct did?
Can I answer what I think are 2 questions then? So I remember many years ago having a meeting in his home, actually, with Richard Branson, and there'd been someone else from another bank there. And we'd had a difficult conversation with this guy, and as this guy left, Richard sort of slumped back into his chair. And I said to him, well, Richard, at the end of the day, what is it that you want? And he said, I only want what I want for all of my businesses, which is where I can see that we can do a better deal for the customer, that I want to be in the business and do a better deal. And it's as simple as that across a whole range of businesses. And so what I think we've done at Virgin Money, which people not only are benefiting from at the moment, but also push us to achieve more and more as we go forwards, is I was on a panel last week where another challenger bank CEO was asked what banking is, and he said, well, it's easy. It's setting off assets against liabilities and taking a skim off the top. It is absolutely not that. For me, banking has a social purpose. It's about creating communities, helping families to thrive, and helping businesses to thrive. And to do that, you have to be able to win the trust of customers and create products and distribution that meets those requirements.
Yeah, but you're not saying you don't take a skim off the top, are you? I mean, that...
Not in the way that he meant. So from our perspective, I mean, we acquired Northern Rock 4 years ago. It was losing £120 million a year when we acquired it. We've now moved that business into profit. We've broadened the product range.
Yeah.
But actually we're offering higher quality products, making a profit, because you have to sustain a business and a bank through making profit. You know, capital is an important part of the equation. But by doing that in a way that customers thoroughly appreciate and get value from, I think that everyone's better off.
But I think Jane made such an important point. I mean, when you recounted your discussion with Richard, it's like you've got to, you know, it only makes sense to go into a business if you really have an idea of what you can do better for the customer. And sometimes that may be a very long-term vision. You know, for us, the places we've succeeded in innovating, you know, throughout the years have always been areas where we've had a very passionate long-term vision, maybe a vision that would take a decade or longer to realize. We've been very stubborn about that vision, but then very flexible about the details about how you get there, because your initial approaches often are wrong.
Right, see, I think absolutely the point I hear from you, and from both of you, is long-term vision. And you know, you come in, you disrupt, you have to be willing to lose some money up front while you establish, while you learn, while you finesse the business model. But so long-term vision, absolutely important. But what you really are both saying is that you don't stop innovating. I mean, you're both mature innovators, if you like, but you don't stop innovating. You still keep trying to do different things, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
But please go ahead.
Well, I'm copying each other, so I have to say, and we haven't met before, but Chris, we try and copy Amazon. We say, you know, what works for customers through Amazon, and how can we translate that into banking? So I don't think, when we talk about innovation, sometimes I think there's a view that innovation has to be something brand new and creative in your own space, and I think we can learn from each other in many ways.
Absolutely. But the other thing is, I mean, it's one thing to have a long-term vision. I think the other thing, I can only speak about Amazon here, is, you know, we're very skeptical about our ability to figure out all the details in advance. And so, and we found over and over again, we had some long-term vision, for example, be the place where customers can find and buy anything they want online. That was the founding vision, not any books, anything. And we realized very early in our history that, you know, books, we figured out how to go from 1 million to 10 million to now to 20 million books here in the UK. But as you start to get into other product categories, it's no matter how many buyers you hire, you just can't carry all the billions of products in the world. So very early on, you know, the vision expanded to say, well, we had to find a way to get third parties selling alongside Amazon. The marketplace was the ultimate answer, but we didn't think of the marketplace first. First, we thought of auctions, which was just copying what eBay was doing, and that didn't work. And, you know, and then we thought about something called Z shops, which you probably never heard of because that failed too. It was the idea that you'd let sellers and merchants sort of build their own storefront, but then they had to figure out how to get people there, and people didn't go there. They went to the Amazon storefront. And so, you know, there were two very big and embarrassing and expensive failures, but the vision that you could only offer all the world's products over time if you invited third parties alongside, that we were very stubborn about that vision.
And if I may, the thing I find fascinating is I think a very disruptive thing you've done is to open a store. And I can't quite get my head around that because it does feel like an innovation.
I'm working on it too, yeah. We opened a bookstore in Seattle last week.
Yeah. Why, Chris, did you go into media? Because, I mean, you've said, and I genuinely don't understand this, you said you must focus on the things that you are going to have a unique place in or that you're good at. There are already lots of media players in the world, let's face it, and your skill, if you like, your competitive advantage is in logistics. It's in warehousing, it's in tracking, it's in all of the getting things to my front door. Why did you suddenly want to build a streaming business? It feels like a kind of a weird departure away from the original core.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, the original core was just books, and we started out saying we wanted to be the places where people could find and buy anything they wanted to buy, and that started with physical products. You know, then Kindle was our first foray into digital products, then digital music, and more recently streaming video in the Prime Video service. So I think, you know, first of all, media was really our home base. That was our starting point. And, you know, we could see many years ago that the era of people buying, you know, shiny discs and shipping them through the post, or, you know, cutting down trees and making them into pulp and then paper and shipping those through the post. I often find it's easier if you sort of think 20 or 50 years ahead. It's much easier to say, well, no, okay, people won't be doing that 50 years from now. And then you don't have to worry about whether it's going to happen tomorrow or 5 years from now. So That was very much part of our home territory, but also, we saw opportunities, as we had done in other businesses, like our original businesses, to innovate on behalf of our customers. In the case of music, to offer them millions of tracks they could download or begin streaming at a click. With Kindle, the vision was, what could be better than next day delivery of a book? It would be, think of any book you want and start reading it in 60 seconds, right? So sometimes starting with very radical visions that clearly would take a very long time to realize, and then ask ourselves, well, what are the first steps we could take in that direction?
Yeah. Right, I want to ask you each, because you're mature disruptors, mistakes you've made along the way. This is the most interesting. So advice for other companies, maybe in the audience, listening at home, or whatever. What are the things you think you might have got wrong over the years, Jane Ann? You must have made some mistakes. You've been 28 years in banking. You've made some howlers, I'm betting.
Well, I mean, in the end, I guess, we, as a team, try and find ways to solve all of our problems so that it's not clear what these huge mistakes might have been. I mean, I think that over time, I've learned an awful lot from having watched things happening in other parts of the business. So, in 2007-8, we were the preferred bidder for Northern Rock. And we spent nearly 8 months looking into that business to understand what had gone wrong there and what we might be able to do to help it. I learned a huge amount about, the problems of banking without having been responsible for the problem, which was a great way forward. But I did spend 8 months of my life actually on something that didn't actually come to fruition in the end. And so perhaps one of the things that I learned from that particular moment, although I look back at it with pleasure, is that perhaps you should cut your losses quicker and not drag on through all sorts of processes once you really sense that they may not come to a live outcome.
Yeah. Okay, Chris.
Well, I mentioned already the failure of auctions and Zed shops, and just the point on that is there's no way we could have gotten to the marketplace without those mistakes. We learned important things there that led us to an answer that's
teleological. Mistakes are good. If you're not making mistakes, then you're not trying.
Fallacy, but you couldn't have gotten there. I mean, a more recent example is on mobile. Today we just were too slow to understand the impact of mobile on our business. I think we're fixing this now, but today there are more connected devices than people in the UK. Within a year or two, 50% of all of e-commerce will be done on mobile devices, smartphones and tablets. It's not that we didn't see that trend, but what we didn't understand is that the rate of mobile penetration growth in the UK and elsewhere wasn't just going faster than anything anyone had ever seen, much faster than the internet. It was accelerating, right? And that curve was getting steeper and steeper. And so even 3-4 years ago, even 12 months ago, we were launching products on the desktop first and then saying, well, in the next 6 months, we'll get all those features launched in our mobile apps as well. And that was too slow. So now it's starting, for the last few months, we have a rule internally. Every product has to launch simultaneously desktop and mobile or be mobile first. And that decision led us, one of our new product launches this year, Prime Now, which is a 1-hour delivery for Prime subscribers, London and Birmingham, and expanding to other cities. That's a mobile-only product. You can only get that 1-hour delivery via the app. Maybe we'll launch it on desktop later, but for now it made sense just to start first with mobile.
And I think as well, if I may, the thing I reflect on is that actually I don't really regret anything I've done. I only regret the things I haven't done. And I wonder whether the lesson from that really is that we should be braver and take more risks from time to time and not regret the undone things.
Well, in business there are good mistakes. You try something, it didn't work, and there are bad mistakes, things you should never have done. But most of the mistakes are good mistakes.
Well, we make a real distinction internally between kind of good failures and bad failures. And good failures are the ones where you learn something. Like as scientists testing a hypothesis, the best hypothesis and the best experiment is one designed where you learn as much from the failure as from the success. If you just fail and you didn't learn anything from it, you've wasted your time and money.
Just what do you think the UK could do to, if you like, improve its record of producing successful disruptors? We've imported quite a lot of successful disruptors, particularly from Silicon Valley. But if we want to produce companies that do this, that think outside the box, that do stuff that hurts other people because they're just doing it in a completely different, better way, what does the UK need to do, Jane Ann?
Oh, I think that probably a good thing, which might be a bit too altruistic, would be for the big companies to realise that they're not going to survive forever without a new injection of thought and creativity that's going to come from the smaller players. And therefore, sometimes being helped by the big players could be good for everybody.
Right.
And you know what? I see that sometimes from the big banks. There are some things that we do that we copy from the big banks. And I remember saying to one of the big banks recently, my team were concerned that we might be plagiarising something. And I happened to meet the CEO and I said, we're actually copying you in this. And he said, great. If you want to come in and talk to me about how to do it even better, I'll help you. And I thought, you know what? That's a fantastic thing to do. And I think that that could help all of us.
Turkeys voting for Christmas. Yep. Christopher, what?
I think the UK is already a very friendly place for technology, and there's a reason why London's become the leading place for startups and scale-ups in Europe. But one reason I think that we see so many of the biggest disruptors or innovators coming out of the US and now China is because they have enormous home markets to start to incubate their business in. So one of the most important things we can do sitting here in the UK is make it really easy for small and emerging companies to access Europe as a single market, as a digital single market. So I think this idea of completing the digital single market and removing some of the barriers, especially for smaller companies, because big companies like Amazon and Google, we have the manpower to navigate the complexity.
Is this a pitch for EU membership?
No. I mean, for us, the single market is very important. We run a single business. We couldn't have 150 million products for our UK customers unless we were tapping into our German retail operation and our French, the sellers based in France. No, this is, I mean, for us, it works fine. It's really the red tape that small players have when they want to trade across Europe. There is no digital single market today. Okay, Christopher North, Jane Ann Gadir, thank you both very much indeed. Thank you. Right. Let's hear it for the incumbents now. My next two guests from Whitbread and Royal Mail. We have Andy Harrison, Chief Executive of Whitbread PLC, and Moya Green, Chief Executive of Royal Mail. Thank you both for coming on. Andy's been 5 years at the helm of Whitbread, and he's actually stepping down next month. He's chairman of Dunelm PLC, and he has served as Chief Executive of EasyJet and RAC, but he cut his teeth at Courtaulds some years back.
Correct.
Moya is one of those, that growing breed of Canadians who've given great public service to their country, then comes here to bring their service here. So Moya, in fact, led a transformation at Canada Post, had been a civil servant in Canada for some 17 years, I think, in different ministries. Thank you both for coming up. Well, we've heard it from the disruptors. What I'd like you each to do, Andy, your business is primarily Premier Inns now, isn't it? That is, it's over half of Whitbread now,
yes.
Correct? Yeah. Why didn't you just call it Premier Inns, actually, rather than Whitbread? You're not a brewer, are you?
Because Costa Coffee is fantastic too.
Right. Yeah. Can you each just tell me about the disruptions that you currently feel that you're facing? We'll start with you, Andy, and then Moya in the Royal Mail.
Well, I think there's substantial dichotomies in today's economy where some things change really, really fast and some things change much more slowly. So in Premier Inn, our distribution has changed beyond recognition over the last 7 or 8 years with the growth of online travel agents, meta-search people like TripAdvisor, Google, and more recently Airbnb. So we've had to invest in the technology, and we have got 30 people in jeans and t-shirts doing digital marketing that we just didn't have 3 years ago. However, our customer experience is about a great night's sleep. That means a great mattress in a nice room, right temperature, good sound insulation, a nice smile, a good breakfast, and Premier Inn's success is on building that customer experience.
So how damaging has Airbnb been to your business?
First of all, I think the online change is fantastic because we're all consumers. We can all see that it's bringing new information, new choices, and efficiency. So there are no signs that Airbnb has damaged our business, but we're watching those changes very carefully. And as I've already said, investing heavily because we have to compete online with the new players at the same time as delivering a great night's sleep.
You're in all the best traditions of business, you're a very positive thinker who wants to see the best in everything. But has there been pressure on your yields, your room rates, as a result of Airbnb? There must have been some pressure that you have felt, because particularly as you're at the budget end of the market, not the premium end, so you're, if you like, competing with the Airbnbs, aren't you?
Airbnb is too small in the UK, in London at the moment, and 60% of our business is B2B, small and medium-sized enterprises who've got large numbers of technicians or salesmen that they want to stay all over the country. So we've got 700 Premier Inns in the UK that offer a consistent experience backed up by a good night guarantee. So I'm not complacent about competition. We need to watch all forms of competition and continually improve our business, whether it's our digital marketing or the quality of our rooms.
Moya, when it comes to disruption of traditional postal services, it just goes back such a long way, really, from the fax machine to email. Just talk us through the kind of the way mail services, both Canada and here, have had to adapt.
Well, you know, this company, Royal Mail, is one of the most treasured institutions in the UK today, and it's been around for 500 years, so it's seen a lot of disruption over its time, and it's managed to make sure that it stayed very, very close to people's hearts, because we've done what we had to do at the time. We've done it very well. And, you know, with over 17% of retail spend now being online, our parcels business is the biggest parcel business right now in the UK. It wasn't always that way, but it is today. So we have become very, very important in what we do best, which is deliver to every single one of the 29 million addresses in the UK every day, 6 days a week. And I think the way that we've done it is a little bit, like Andy said, we've had to invest. We've had to invest in technology. When I started in our business, I would say it's fair to say that our technology was state of the art. Well, it's not state of the art today. We still have lots more to do. But as a result of the investments that we've made in the operation, in our people, in the technology, we've built a place for ourselves in the intensely competitive parcel business, which is #1 today in the UK.
But hang on.
And 30% of our revenue in parcels is now international.
But hang on, you both talked about investing, and I just want to push you both on that, because if you're in a business and you're being disrupted and you're seeing your profitability eradicated by competitors, it might be that the best thing to do is not to invest. I mean, it might be the best thing to do is to say, let's retrench, or let's, and you have retrenched, I mean, clearly Royal Mail has, but the idea of saying, let's upgrade, let's, you know, let's spend money is actually quite a courageous one.
Well, I think you have to, if we're going to stay around for another 500 years, Evan, you know, we're going to have to keep up with the times, and we're going to have to make investments, prudent investments. I agree with you. You have to be sensible. On the mail side of our business, which is still a very important part of our business, you know, 13 billion envelopes are going through the system every year, and it's a very important part of our business. Mail still gets a lot of mind space, and so we treat that part of our business with a lot of respect. But it has changed. Certainly a lot of messages now are delivered via your smartphones. So you have to be prudent in your investments. And shrinking also takes investment. That's an important thing to acknowledge, that if you're going to give your business a completely new lease on life, the shrinkage on one side of the business, while you are ramping up on the other side of the business, that also takes investment. Investment in your people, training your people, helping your people understand that the market is different. There's a very big opportunity in this new market, but we have to move in a sensible way around what's happening. So I think you have to be prudent, but you won't stay around for 500 years like Royal Mail has if you don't move with the times.
Andy, did you find it difficult to persuade shareholders to sort of back a vision of spending money in a hotel's business?
It's absolutely not about investing money. We'll invest £700 million this year in capital expenditure. It's much more, I think, an internal issue about making sure the company, and particularly the leadership, have got the right attitude, and it's about bringing in new skills. Because as we've heard today, disruptors bring new technologies, new skills, new ways of working, and in traditional businesses, I think you need to be able to graft those skills, bring those people into your organisation to create muscles in the organisation that you didn't have before. So I think having the attitude, the right attitude, is more important than just the money.
Right, but the attitude is key. And what I'm interested in from both of you is whether in a big incumbent where everything is just changing around you, and perhaps not in a way that suits you, is whether you see your job as managing decline. And that there are very few people who want to go to work. It's a sort of psychological thing. You don't want to go to work and think, I'm managing decline. No one wants to do that. You don't get, but is that how you
No, I certainly don't want to do that. I mean, we would be letting everybody down in the UK if we thought about our job that way. The Royal Mail is the most trusted company in the UK today. We are now on the Forbes 100 most admired companies list. We won the Dow Jones Sustainability Index for globally, beating out huge big companies like UPS 2 years in a row. We did that because our people are coming into work with a lovely lilt in their gait every day.
Some of them, let's face it, let's be realistic.
In fairness,
it's a nice picture, but it is.
In fairness, 95% of our people, we wouldn't get the customer scores that we have if they weren't.
They would.
I must rebut. This year, Whitbread will make over £500 million profit. We're growing at 13 to 14% per annum. We've set a 5-year goal to increase Premier in the UK by 40%. So our business is thriving because I think we're taking the best of what people want, that customer experience. 2 weeks ago, Premier Inn was voted the best UK hotel chain in which, by a long way, because we offer a great night's sleep. But we need to move with the times on distribution.
Right. Now, let me ask you both a question then. Because we've heard from disruptors that often they face resistance from incumbents and there's a pressure for regulation that makes life harder for the disruptors. How big are your public affairs teams and how actively engaged are they with, let's call it, blocking or worsening the regulatory regime around disruptors like, new companies coming into your businesses? Particularly, I'm thinking of Airbnb. Okay. Well, Andy, do you basically try and lobby for Airbnb tenants to have to?
There's one person in our public affairs team, 2 if you include me. However, what we do think is, in the same way that companies like ours have to move fast to keep up with change, I think technology is moving faster than the regulators. So you mentioned it earlier on. If you look at Airbnb, 40% of their listings are multiple listings. That means a person offering more than one site. And I was on their site at the weekend, and there was a chap called Nabil with 13 sites. So these are probably professional landlords. How does the government, how does Airbnb know that these professional landlords are, as you said earlier, complying with all the same laws that we are, whether it's health and safety, fire, consumer protection, paying their taxes? And I think the government needs to think about how it's going to use the information, because the information's available, and how new companies like Airbnb should feel the same degree of accountability as we do to make sure that all of our suppliers, all of our partners, comply with the legislation that we do.
I think regulation is a real problem for anybody, regardless of size, regardless of how long you've been in the business. And let me just give you an example. We're the universal service provider in the UK, and we're very proud to be that. But that means we have to go to 29 million addresses. We have to go overnight delivery. We have to go 6 days a week. We have to go with the highest regulated minimum service standard in the world, 93% of the time on time. And we are very, very proud to live up to that service standard. Other incumbents do not have to do that. They can pick where to go. They can cherry pick. And if there's only so much revenue available in an industry at any given time to support all of the industry, you have to ask yourself the question, not only is regulation keeping up where the market is going from the disruptor's point of view, are they keeping up where the market is going from the incumbent's point of view? Because it's the incumbent in the case of our business. It's the incumbent that has the responsibility to serve everyone. So I think regulation is a problem regardless of size, regardless of whether you've been in the business 1 year or 500.
But how much time do you spend pointing these things out to politicians and to regulators? I mean, I'm really interested, Andy. You gave a very clear critique, and one that I acknowledged, I think had some merit earlier, about level playing fields between different kinds of competitors in the business. So government might want to think, how much regulation is this chap? What was his name? Nadia?
Nabil, yeah.
Nabil. How much regulation is Nabil facing when his mini hotel business on Airbnb's site? Do you point out to government they might want to think about that, or do you leave it to government to think about that?
No, we write to the government. We wrote letters to the House of Lords as they were talking about the recent deregulation bill. We speak to the CBI because we are not looking for any special favours. We just want to make sure that regulation keeps up with technology and there is a level playing field. So yes, we point those things out, but clearly it's not our responsibility to do it. But it's a fact that government and whether it's local or national, are not keeping up with the pace of change of technology. They're not using the information that is available, and they're not requesting the information, and I don't think they're putting a sufficiently strong requirement on the new companies to follow the same regulation that we do.
It's an incredibly hard balance, though, isn't it? Because for the first half of the conversation, I was inclined to say, how do we make it easier for disruptors? And the answer, bluntly, is going to be, don't get in their way, don't stop them doing things, don't put petty requests about fire safety and paying tax and all these other annoying things in life in their way, and then they can just get on with it and happily disrupt. And then in the latter part of the conversation, you really do see that there are some unlevel playing fields, and you're inclined to say, level up the playing field. But how are we ever going to reconcile making it great for disruptors to come in and great for incumbents to fight?
But it's not about disruptors, it's about technology. Everybody needs to recognize what technology can do, what it can deliver for your customers, how it can make your business efficient. And the taxman needs to make sure that he collects all the taxes that due. And in the same way that we need to keep up with the disruptors, so does he. So I'm not against disruptors. I believe in creative disruption, creative destruction in capitalism.
It is fair to say what you have just said, Evan, though. It's very hard for regulators to find the right balance. And what I've been especially gratified to see is that increasingly regulators are willing to listen. They're willing to learn about the business. And they understand that their own procedures, to be fair, sometimes hold them back in being able to be responsive. But so I think there is a lot of work that we have to do, and it's our responsibility in industry to do it, to help our regulators understand how quickly all of these markets are changing. And it is a difficult balance.
But put another, I mean, technology, we need to use it so we can deliver a better experience for our customers, and we're all customers of the government.
I mean, I do very briefly want you to each comment on whether you can be disruptors or whether, you know, your big companies, your old companies, is whether it is possible to, in a company like Royal Mail, around for 500 years, or Whitbread, an old brewer that runs coffee shops and hotels, it's whether you can have and find that entrepreneurial streak of an Uber or an Airbnb. I think the answer is going to be yes.
I don't want to compare myself to Uber or Amazon. I mean, I think Royal Mail is a fundamentally different company. However, I do think that it would be wrong to think of Royal Mail as this stodgy, clunky old thing that cannot keep up. We would not be #1 in the parcel business in the UK today if we were not keeping up. We were the first to put Sunday service on the ground, parcels inside the M25 area. We were the first to open our networks later and later so that people can go upstairs in the comfort of their home, order later and later, put their orders in, we deliver the next day. You know, we put these operational things in place across 120,000 people, 60,000 routes. It's big, the Royal Mail. We put that in place from the time we had the idea till the time with our unions, with our people, we had it on the ground 6 weeks. So I just would not like people to go away from here today thinking that the Royal Mail cannot proudly hold its head up and say, Yes, there are disruptors, but we are darn good.
I'd answer the question with a different word. Innovation is what we need to keep driving forward. And I think there are plenty of examples within our business.
Give us a couple of innovation examples out of Whitbread.
Costa Express. How many people here have tasted our wonderful Costa Express, which is now available in machines? We've got a new product, Hub by Premier Inn, which is a smaller, compact city centre room. All innovations, and we've got the advantage of having the resources to be able to take the risk on launching new products, and we've got the expertise and the market knowledge. So we have all the preconditions to be good innovators. We just need to drive it, I think, particularly from the top of the organisation.
Just a quick word then on where disruption in your businesses goes, because disruption is a continual process. Moya, drones, the next big thing in home delivery. Are you quite seriously, are you vexed by that, or is it something as a threat or not?
No, not at all. I mean, I love to see things like that happening. I remember, I'm old enough, Evan, I remember when we started talking in Canada about driverless trains. Now, I'm really dating myself. But within 5 years of the Department of Transportation Canada starting to do research into driverless trains with all of the issues that involved, within 5 years, it became a norm at airports. And we would never build a train at an airport today that had a driver on it. So, no, I love to see things like that. I love to see
You would love to see drones delivering objects to people's homes?
I don't think it's going to be to every single address. You know, I think it's going to work in more remote places where you don't have to deliver too much. But I love to see things like that. I love to see how sensory technology is working so that we can probably see the day when we're going to have driverless trucks and really very, very well constructed ways on the highway system. So no, I think part of keeping up and being here for 500 years to come is to watch all of those things with great interest.
Both of you, I admire your indefatigability. Thank you both very much indeed. Thank you. Always three very interesting pairs, and thank you to all of them. And they all, I think, demonstrate at least a great commitment and passion for their own product and a sort of a failure to accept defeat. It now, no, you know, in a good way. Yep. Now behoves me to introduce the next session, Getting Down to Business, CBI President Paul Drexler. Thank you very much indeed. That's it.
Thank you, super.
Hey, man.
Thanks, Evan. Appreciate it. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, what a fantastic session that was. I don't think I've often heard